23 through 25. I'm going to read it from a different version, at least this time around. Hebrews 10, 23 through 25. And it says, "Let us hold tightly, without wavering, to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works, and let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near." Gonna turn the time over to Jared. I'm super glad to have Jared back with us. It's been wonderful to have him back at home, and gonna turn the time over to him.
Good morning. Let's pray before we start. Dear Father in heaven, I pray one more time that you will be with us through this church service, and I don't want to give my own message, I want to give your message. So please come and be with us, be with me, and be with everyone else here. And open our hearts to listen to you. Thank you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay. Good. We have pictures. Okay, so does this work? Okay, perfect. This works. The last couple of years, I have been serving as a student missionary with Adventist Frontier Missions in the country of Cambodia. If you're not familiar with Adventist Frontier Missions, what sets them apart from other mission organizations is that they work specifically in areas that have not yet heard the gospel. They don't have a presence from our church. So you can go with other mission projects, and some of them, like they're maintaining hospitals, whatever, in places where there's a long-standing Adventist presence. Adventist Frontier Missions, or AFM, does not. So they work in places where there is no long-standing Adventist presence, where people don't know about the gospel. So I'm working with them in Cambodia. Cambodia is, do any of you have any idea where Cambodia is? My family, of course. Cambodia is, okay, tell me this, what continent is Cambodia in? Asia. Okay, Cambodia is in Asia, and Cambodia is in Southeast Asia in the bottom right. So there's a little cluster of countries. Vietnam, Thailand are maybe a little bit more popular and well-known, but let me zoom in a little bit. So it's right down there. Cambodia is the little green country. There's Vietnam on the right, Thailand on the left, Laos above it, and China above that. So that's where it is. And actually, I am on the very right side, the east side of Cambodia. I can drive 30 minutes and I'll be at the Vietnam border. So I'm really close to there. When I left 2 years ago to go to Cambodia, I was expecting a different culture. I didn't really know what to expect. I'll talk a little bit about that. So this was the first view I had of Cambodia. Cambodia is, there's a lot of rice fields. Most of the country is lowlands. It's hot, it's humid. There's palm trees here and there, and it's mostly rice fields. And here in this picture, you can see the Mekong River, which is, I think it's the longest river in Southeast Asia. I'm not 100% sure. It has some sort of record. It's the biggest something or the longest something. I don't remember exactly what. But it's a big river, very wide. But this is what Cambodia is like. It's rice fields. The people live in little huts. Most of them are elevated, they're like on poles because rice needs water and they have floods in the lowlands every year. Where I live is actually not in the lowlands, so I live in the hills. They call them the mountains. I don't call them the mountains because I grew up here and I know what real mountains are. But we don't have so many rice fields. We have jungle, and we actually have, it's the only province in the country that has a few pine forests. But it's the place that everyone else wants to go on vacation. It's actually called, the city is called Sain Manoram, which is a hard name to translate. It's kind of like the Garden of Eden. It's not heaven, but it's like the place where heaven and earth meet, is what it means. So it's a nice place, and I like it because it's a little bit cooler. It's not as hot as the rest of the country. Anyway, so 2020, we got to Cambodia, and it was in the middle of COVID. So actually tourists could not come into the country. We came in on a business visa. And we got to the capital, we quarantined for a few days, and then we rode in the back of one of the missionaries' truck out to it's a 6-hour drive to Monulkiri province, where we are, and we drove there to spend the rest of we rode in the back of the truck to maintain distancing from them, mostly for the sake of all of the other people in the province who were worried about having foreigners come and getting infected. Finished our 2-week quarantine there, and then just kind of start life. Like, we learned to ride the motos. This was our transportation for the time that we were there, learning about the market. Many of you have been to other third world countries, and it's your typical open air, whatever market. Not clean by our standards, but very easy to buy things, very cheap, and the people are friendly. That's something that I miss here. I can't just walk into the market and then start talking to friendly people. That doesn't happen here. Anyway, there are several differences that I want to kind of take note of. And some of them I actually didn't really see until I came back a few weeks ago. One, everything is poorer. Everything is poorer. Cars are expensive, and gas is expensive. Most people make $200 to $300 a month. You can't pay for gas for a car, because gas is the same price there as it is here. You can't pay for gas on $200 or $300 a month. So they drive motos. There's actually, in the country, there's 5 million motos registered and like 800,000 cars or something. So there's almost 6 motos for every car. The other thing that people drive is these tuk-tuks. If you go to the capital or you go to another city, this is their form of taxi. You can fit 3 people in the back seat, fairly comfortably. The other thing is homes. They're not fancy. This is the home that I lived in the village for most of my time there. I didn't want to live in town, so I actually live out in the village, which is for me, it's a 10-minute drive from town. For other people, I don't want to say for other people. When you first get there, you're driving slow, everywhere is slow, and it's maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And when it rains and the road is wet, you'll see the roads in a minute. It can be like 30 or 40 minutes, but it's not too far when the road is dry. Another thing that is different is there's more respect. There's a lot more respect, especially to elders. This is a picture from an outreach event that we had at the school. We invited, at our school, this is a couple of our students. We invited for, okay, this was on service day. One of the projects that we did, we invited all of the poorer families from the neighborhood to come to the school, and we gave them food, and then we had the students were circulating and talking to them. But they're very respectful. You greet everyone with a sampea. And how high you do it is how important they are. Like, if I'm greeting a peer or something, I might do like this. If I'm greeting a teacher or a doctor, I put it a little higher. For the king, I'm putting it up here. And then for God, you put it above your head. So different levels of respect for different people. Practically, most people don't actually follow the levels and care about the levels. Some of the cultural stuff, the cultural details are becoming less important recently. But there's a huge amount of respect for everyone, for your peers, and even more for your elders. And then for God when we're praying. It's also important to respect other people's property. One of the things that they do is they will always leave their shoes outside. So this was at a school event. We had tons of shoes outside the school. We have racks to put shoes on, and there's a sign by the front of the door that says, in English and Khmer, the local language, both, it says, leave your shoes outside. At this time, we had an event, and the racks were overflowing. There were shoes everywhere on the ground, too. But respect for people and for their property. Another thing is people are really friendly, not rushed. This was a picture of a woman in a village that we met once. It's very easy to get into conversations with people, random people that you don't know, and they're not rushed. I've mentioned that to a few people, and I've had a couple people ask me, like, well, how do you figure that they're not rushed? Asians drive so fast. Yeah, it's true. Asians drive really fast. But the thing is, in spite of the fact that they drive fast, they're weaving around everyone. It's like there are traffic rules, but most people don't follow them. If we get into, when I was leaving to come back, there was, the police were blocking off the roads, so we got stopped for 30 minutes on our way to the airport, and we were a little bit more rushed than I would have preferred because of that, but there was a procession, like there was someone important coming by. The police closed down all the roads, but everyone's still happy. There's no road rage or anything. You don't see that here. If the roads were shut down for 30 minutes, people are not going to still be happy. So that's something that's really impressed me, is like, there's no rush. I got back into Seattle and everyone is rushing around the airport. Like, why are you walking so fast? But it's developing quickly, like most places in what we call third world countries. This is, when I first got there, my first apartment where I spent my quarantine was on this road. It was nasty when it rained. But this road is paved now. So are most other roads in town. And even though I have now moved out of town into the village, a place that is more rural and further out, I've heard talk of even the roads there being paved in the next year or two. So things are developing very quickly. Smartphones are just as common there as they are here. And I think that that's actually doing a lot to lessen the culture gap, because especially the younger generation have huge amount of exposure to other especially Western culture, through their smartphones. So there's definitely a lot of change, but those are some of the things that I've noticed. But I want to talk some about what I've done. I've spent most of my time working at the school. This is the Adventist school that we have there, Christensen Adventist School. We have 180 students this last year. So it's a big school. Inside there's a gym, there's a central gym, and then on the sides, flanking the gym, are the classrooms. So you enter all the classrooms from the gym. This was our school staff the first year that I was there, and we actually had more staff this last year. When I got there, just after I got there, the country had managed to keep COVID out very well because of the system of doing COVID tests at the airport and making everyone quarantine until they got negative test results, all of that. Soon after we got there, there were some people that had escaped quarantine, and their test results came back positive, but they were already gone. They had escaped the hotel. And that was when COVID really started in Cambodia. And it was weird to me because COVID was already starting to settle down here, like churches had reopened. And that's when it was really starting in Cambodia. So schools were closed. That made our work more difficult because instead of interacting with the students every day, we were recording videos, classroom videos, to send to the students so they could watch their lessons, and then we would send home tests for them, or we would have tests online. We were able to soon open the school. This was a few of my classes. This was my 4th grade class this last year. Some of my kindergarten class. This was on Cambodia Day at school, so we weren't wearing uniforms. We were all dressed up for Cambodia Day in the national colors, which are red, white, and blue. This is during one of my computer classes. So the first 2, 4th grade and kindergarten, were English classes. Most of my classes were English, but I did teach a few extra computer, music, whatever. There's not a lot to tell from my work at the school, and this is one of the things that I was not expecting as a missionary. You hear all the stories and it seems like a glamorous life, but it's not. It's just like normal day-to-day life, but a little bit different in a little different culture. There are special times on service day. I already showed you one picture of the students when we gave out food to the poorer people in the community. We had a group of students go to the hospital and visit patients. The hospital does not serve food, so they depend on their family for food. And we took food on that day to a lot of the patients in the hospital. And then we had the Christmas program, which was fun for me because I organized it. So I was the organizer of the Christmas program, and this year I want to say we had like 400 people come or something. It's a pretty big event. Christmas is not a celebrated holiday because it's Christian, and there's no Christianity in Cambodia. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So there's not a lot of glamour, but the things that make it worth it are when you see the students learning about God or showing interest in following God. This was one moment that I loved during the Christmas program. A couple of the teachers were telling the salvation story, in Khmer, the local language, and one of the students on the side was recording. And it's a little thing, but we don't see a lot of the fruit from what we do. I pray for my students. I pray for my students a lot. But for most of them, I don't think that I will see until heaven the results of our work and what we have done. In kindergarten, I taught my students to pray. They learned in English class, so we learned a simple prayer in English. For what it's worth, they don't understand it. They don't understand what they're saying, but I try to help them at least understand that God wants to be their friend. That's about the most that they can at their age. The other aspect of the project which is more typical for AFM, is church plants. So the village is more primitive. You see, this is what our classroom looks like. It's nothing fancy, but it's modern. This is the school in the village, the public school in the village. And I haven't been inside the classrooms in the city school. I don't think that it's quite as nice as ours, quite as clean as ours. But the villages are more primitive. But the villages are also where we have the biggest and the fastest growing church groups. This is our church group in Dumchi Village, is what it's called in the magazine, the AFM magazine. That's not its real name, but that's what I'll call it since that's the name in the magazine. We have almost 20 members now. So I have been involved in the village a little bit, and I will be involved there more. Preaching, teaching in the church. We have a children's program for the village kids. And that's what I'll be involved in more this next year. I was praying a lot about what to do this next year. And I was planning to come back. I had already stayed a second year that I wasn't planning to. The first year, I didn't know the language. I didn't understand the culture. I couldn't do a lot. And I was kind of just thinking that through, and I'm like, well, I'm at the end of the first year, I'm learning the language now. I understand the culture. I feel like I haven't done anything, and I want to. So that was when I made the decision to stay a second year. And then at the end of this last year, I was planning to come back. Obviously, I haven't finished school yet. I need to finish college. And there's all of these things. But I wasn't completely comfortable with the decision, so I started praying about it. And I wanted it to be absolutely clear, if I stayed, that that was what God wanted me to do. So I prayed, and I told God that if I needed two things. I needed someone to ask me to stay, if there was something that I could help with, that he wanted me to help with. I needed someone to ask me to stay, and I needed someone to work with. Both of those were things that I thought were very unlikely. And I prayed about that for a couple of months, and then the week that I had decided was the week that I was going to tell AFM what I was going to do. This is my plan. Some of the missionaries talked to me, and they're like, we have this church out in the village that I just showed you, the church that I just showed you. And they're like, they're growing. They need to learn to be doing Bible studies themselves, leading the church themselves, preaching themselves, having their own nominating committee, whatever. But they don't know how to do that yet. And the other Bible worker out there, they have always had two Bible workers out there, but the foreign Bible worker had left, and the local Bible worker was planning to leave, and they said, would you consider doing that? So they asked me if I would help with that this next year in helping take the church to independence and help them learn to do those things on their own so that in the future, they don't need to have a Bible worker out there all the time. But they're not ready to take that step yet, so they asked me to do that. And I said, well, this is what I've been praying. I hadn't told anyone what I'd been praying because obviously, as soon as I tell someone, they're going to all start coming up with reasons for me to stay because they want me to stay. So I hadn't told anyone, but I said, okay, well, this is what I've been praying. I need someone to work with. If I have someone to work with, then I'll stay. The local Bible worker who was out there was planning to go to college to do theology and be a pastor for the mission. That plan fell through, and the mission asked him to wait a year before beginning that. So that meant that he could stay one more year too. So it was very clear to me that this is what God wants me to do. And that's amazing. I've never seen God work so clearly before, but it was amazing to see. In Cambodia, in the villages, we work with the Banong people. The Banong people are animists. Most of the people in Cambodia are Buddhists. If you're not familiar with Buddhism, Buddhists don't believe that there is a God. They believe in essentially salvation by works. If you work hard enough and you manage to become completely unselfish, put yourself out of the way so that you're completely serving others and you have no thought for yourself, if you achieve that, then you achieve salvation. And that's what they work for. Unfortunately, only one person has ever achieved that. His name was Buddha. There's a misconception, and that's that Buddhists worship Buddha. That's not true. They don't worship Buddha. They honor Buddha a lot because he was the teacher who began that religion. But Buddha only ever aspired to be a teacher. He didn't aspire to be anything else, and he certainly didn't want people to worship him. And some of them actually probably do worship him. But the concept of the religion is that, and it's kind of depressing because they have no hope. All of their life they have to strive and work to achieve salvation their own. Animism is a little bit different. One more thing about Buddhism. Buddhism and animism both have attachments to spiritualism. And spiritualism being like worshiping the spirits, supernatural things. Buddhism on its own has no connection to that, but Buddhism in Cambodia has had a lot of past influence from Hinduism, and Hinduism is a very spiritualistic religion. They worship the spirits, and they're afraid of the spirits and curses from other people. And so there's a lot of influence with that. They wear red strings around their wrists that's like spirit charms to help protect them. They have shrines in front of their houses where they leave food for, I don't understand if it's the gods or their ancestors, it's something like that. And once a year, they celebrate a holiday called Pyongbun. It's essentially like Ancestors' Day, but it's a very spiritualistic holiday, and it's one that we do not celebrate on the project. It's coming up in a couple weeks, actually. Animism in the village is different. They don't follow Buddha. Well, some of them do. The religions all get mixed together. But animism is directly worshiping the spirits and fearing the spirits. And, if we do something wrong, then we have to sacrifice to appease the spirits. A couple weeks ago, some of you were here for Sabbath school when we showed the video that we made to show we don't need to sacrifice anymore because Jesus became the sacrifice for us. But they still struggle with that. Because they live in Cambodia and Buddhism is so prevalent, they do follow the Buddhist customs, but in addition, they fear curses. If you touch someone who is dead, who was killed in an accident, if someone died in an accident, they didn't die a natural death of old age, then it was because they did something wrong, and the spirits came after them. And if you touch them, or you have anything to do with them, if you attend their funeral, then the spirits will come after you too. So when people die of accidents, getting hurt in the jungle, something like that, it's very hard for them. We actually help a lot on those funerals because they don't get support from their neighbors and family. But they fear curses. Another thing is helping Christians, interacting with Christians, because Christians don't honor the spirits. So the spirits can come after you for that too. It's a very dark side indeed. And Satan knows the culture, and he knows the ignorance, and he adapts his attacks. The interference from demons is much more, we know that Satan works against us, right? That Satan doesn't like us and Satan tries to hurt us. But we don't usually see him working physically in our lives. In a place like Cambodia, you can see it. It's a very dark place. The consequence of that is that when light shines in the darkness, it's a beautiful thing. This is one picture that I forgot to show. This is a funeral, and all of the people lowering the coffin into the grave, the coffin was actually one that we made. Like, it's a homemade thing. All of these people helping are Adventists, school staff or village church members or something like that, because the other people in the village, they won't have anything to do with it. They don't want to touch it or they'll be cursed. So that's one way that we can help them. Okay. There was one day, this is story time. Okay, there was one day I was working at the school, and one of my friends texted me. One of the other SMs, and she was a student missionary. She was also one of the missionary kids there, about my age, a year younger than me or something. She texted me, and she was saying that she was having a hard time coming up with something to do for worship, for Bible study. So I made a suggestion. We ended up talking on the phone, and something was wrong. I don't know what happened. I think she was in a little bit of depression for something. I'm not really sure. And so I made the suggestion. I said, something to study, and I said, you need to pray and you need to talk to God. And she said, but I don't want to talk to him. Like, I don't feel like I can talk to him. And at that point, Satan attacked her. And she heard, I didn't know anything about it until later, but she heard a voice. If you don't want to talk to him, you can come join my side. And she was like, no. She screamed, she's like, no, desperately. And then the voices said, if you won't come willingly, then I'll force you. And I'm hearing, it was a terrible phone call. I was scared. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew that she was in serious trouble. And finally, the only thing I could think of to do, I was afraid to let her off the phone because I had no idea what would happen. She was alone at home at that point. There were a lot of other terrible things that had been happening on the project. A lot of the staff kids, most of the staff kids at school had ended up terribly sick the previous week. They were all in the hospital, really sick. One of the other missionaries, the principal of the school, had like panic attacks or something. I don't really know. She'd been at home for a couple of days, and Hannah's parents had gone to be with her, and she was at home by herself. I was afraid to let her off the phone. And the only thing I could think of was I prayed. I prayed for her, and then afterwards, she responded and she said, she's like, hang up and don't you ever pray for me again. I didn't want to hang up the phone. I didn't have to. She hung up for me. And at that point, it's like, okay, well, I didn't know what to do before. I know what to do now. The only thing that I could do was to call her parents, and I did. And as I'm dialing the number, I have this feeling, I just know she's going to be mad at me for telling someone. She's never going to want to have anything to do with me again. She's never going to want to be my friend again. All of this stuff. But you have to do what you have to do. She was in danger. And I called her parents. They left where they were immediately and went back. And she'd locked herself in the bedroom. They couldn't get in. They had to knock down the door. I don't know how they did it because it's a strong door, but somehow they knocked down the door, and they were with her, and they prayed and they sang, and the demon left. Talking to her later, she had no recollection of what had happened after she told me that she didn't want to talk to God. She certainly didn't remember telling me to never call or to never pray for her again. She was trying to call out for help, but I didn't hear that. That didn't come through. She was planning for a Christmas program in Dumchi Village, so it kind of interrupted our week, but we kind of calmed down from that, and she continued planning for the Christmas program. And so Sabbath, we had a Christmas program at church in town. We drove an hour out to the village, and we had a Christmas program there. And afterwards, we're playing Ninja. Do any of you know what Ninja is? Okay, so it's a game. You have people, and you take a swing at someone, and then you hold, and you're trying to touch the other person without them touching you. Because if they touch you, you're out. And in the middle of that, her knee gave way. Like, she had no issues or anything, but her knee gave way, and as she fell, she ended up spraining her leg, and she caught herself on her arms, and she broke her arm. And we splinted her arm as best we could. We loaded her into the car, drove back to town, which took like twice as long as before, probably 2 hours, because we were being extremely careful on the bumpy road. She was in a lot of pain. She'd broken both bones in her arm, and got her to the hospital in the capital. The whole trip, she had this message from the other day, like echoing through her mind over and over again. The thing that the demon had said, if you won't come willingly, then I'll force you. If you won't come willingly, then I'll force you. It was like echoing through her mind the whole time. Breaking your arm isn't fun, but she got treatment and it was getting better. She got a splint for it, and they came back later in the week. And then on Friday night, we have all of the missionaries get together and we have worship together. We sing some songs and we pray. And we were doing that, and we were talking to our field director, which is like the director for all of the projects in Southeast Asia. We'd had so much stuff going on. This incident was the biggest, but it wasn't the only one. There were a lot of other incidents that happened. One of the church members out in the village was demon-possessed. There were things that were happening on our team, like I mentioned, and all the staff kids were sick. And it's little things that look like a coincidence when they're isolated, but there was so much stuff. I came up with a list of 12 things that were all like terrible things that happened within a week. There was so much stuff happening all at the same time. It's hard to call it a coincidence. I don't believe that it was at all. We were talking to our field director about a lot of this, and he was encouraging us. Hannah her pain was gone at that point. Like, she had the splint and everything. But because of spraining her leg, she still couldn't walk without support. She was actually supposed to be in a wheelchair, but we hadn't been able to get one yet at that point. So just give her support, and she could walk very slowly, and it was painful to walk. And her arm was in the sling, but her arm was painful. And so we had this discussion with our field director, and then at the end of worship, we picked 3 of us to pray for 3 people who had been attacked in various ways. Hers, of course, was the biggest, the most obvious. But there were 2 other cases as well. One of them was the missionary I mentioned who had panic attacks and stuff, and there was another case as well. So we picked 3 people to pray for the 3 of them, and while we were praying, Hannah said later that her eyes were closed, but she felt like something in her arm and her leg, and it was like the room got very bright. I don't know if you've noticed, if you have your eyes closed and someone turns on the light, you can't see, but you can see. You still notice the light. And it was like the room got very bright. And then after prayer, we finished praying, and she stood up. And she had a huge smile on her face. And it took me a minute to realize that she shouldn't be standing up without help. A few minutes before, she could not even walk without support at each step. And she could walk. It's like the pain in her leg was gone. Her arm was still broken, but even most of the pain there was gone. It's amazing to see how God works in these situations. Satan tried to attack, but who won? God won. Here's the thing. Spiritual warfare is not isolated to places like Asia. It happens here too. We just don't see it. Satan doesn't tend to work as obviously here, but we have the same devils. Satan does the same things here. We often don't feel like studying the Bible. We don't want to talk to God, and he draws us away from God, and he, in various ways, tries to make us give our allegiance to him. We have the same devils. And it's important to be committed to God. That means we need to have a personal relationship with God. We need to study the Bible. We need to pray. We need to share what we learn. I want to read the verse one more time that we read. Where's my Bible? I want to read the verse one more time that we read at the beginning. Hebrews 10. And I'm going to expand a little bit. Verse 19 to 25. If you want, you can follow along with me. Hebrews 10, verse 19 to 25. Therefore, brethren, having boldness to enter the holiest by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way, which he consecrated for us, through the veil, that is, his flesh, and having a high priest over the house of God. This verse is a little complicated. Okay, so because God gave us a new way, he gave us a new and living way through his death, now we can have boldness to enter the high place. And because we have a high priest, God standing for us. Okay, verse 22. Let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider one another to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the matter of some, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. I think that the day is approaching, and it's getting very close. And so it's important to maintain our connection with God. Remember what it said? Can you read this with me? Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. Last weekend, we had a youth conference. My sister and I were at a youth conference in Idaho, and on Sabbath night, I was leading a discussion there about the things that we had learned. The theme was 100%, being 100% committed to God. And I challenged the youth there to I actually gave them a piece of paper, and I said, we discussed what it means to be committed, how to be committed. And I said, okay, now I want you to write down something that you can practically do this week to increase your commitment to God. I'm not going to give you a piece of paper, but I want to challenge you to do the same thing. We know how important it is to follow God and how important it is to be committed to him. And we know that Satan attacks us. Often I think that we forget about the importance because demon attacks are not as clear and obvious here as they are in a place like Cambodia. Satan works in different ways in different cultures, but his aim is the same, and that's to draw us away from God and draw us to follow him. So I challenge you to think about it and decide on something that you can do this week, something practical to increase your connection to God and to make God the most important person in your life. We're in a war. The great controversy is a war. I think that we often don't think of it in those terms, but it is. And we're getting close to the end of the war, the final battle, and that's when the fighting is the most desperate. It's too dangerous to be comfortable. This is the time that we need to be the most, what is the word that I'm looking for? This is the time when it's the most important for us to be making sure that our relationship with God is strong and that we're putting him at the front of our lives. So hold fast without wavering, not to rules and the 10 Commandments and whatever, but to God and to our relationship with him. If we let go, we die. So hold fast to him.